rocking the blood sugars at 120 and stable. Been riding a little higher lately. Been dealing with some things that are a little more personal, but I won't delve into that too much. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but not in this video. This video is more specific to something else. And if you are a lady, this is more for you. If you are a guy, and you're just curious, delve into it, I guess. But with that being said, we will start today's video. It's Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. And as you can tell by the title of today's video, I'm going to be sharing how I deal with type 1 diabetes and menstruation, or menstruation as some people would say it. This is more particularly for females that are that have periods or will be having periods very, very soon, like a prepubescent or beginning to be a pubescent female teen. And kind of how to deal with blood sugars and type 1 diabetes and periods. And I've had enough periods now with type 1 diabetes as to kind of how mine pattern. Do know that every woman is going to have a different pattern for her periods, and you may not even have patterns or nothing may happen to you. There are some women that don't have any patterns or any changes related to blood glucose levels, and there are people like me. I would say a lot of people have changes. Mine are kind of backwards from some people's, but this is what I've noticed most of the time. Although I've had some months where they have been. I've seen some months that they are out of that pattern, and you just got to deal with it as it goes. But like I said, for any of you men watching, this really doesn't apply to you, but the only thing I can say related to men that I have read, men, if you do not control your blood glucose levels, you may have a hard time getting an erection. There, I said it. This is a channel where I'm going to talk freely and maturely about some different things that are a little more having to deal with life and biology, and this is one of those things. So males, like I just said, if you don't take care of your blood sugars or aren't taking care of diabetes, you can have a problem getting an erection. So I want to make you aware of that. If you're a woman and you have diabetes, type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, more specifically geared more towards type 1, because some of the tips I'm going to give only gear towards type 1s who are insulin dependent fully. You know that you often have some issues dealing with insulin and insulin dosing with your period. For those of you that don't know what a period is, you might have to go back to biology class or health class, but basically a period is everything to do with a woman being able to produce a child. A woman ovulates an egg once a month. It travels through the fallopian tubes. If it is not fertilized by a sperm, or any sperm does not meet that egg, the egg does travel down into the uterus, and the uterus has a thickened lining, hoping for an implantation of a fetus or an embryo. And if that uterine lining is not used, it is shed out with the excess fluids and excess blood through the vaginal opening, and that is through the cervix and the vaginal opening, and that is the menstrual period. And that cycle repeats typically every 28 to 35 days. Some people are a little shorter, maybe 21 days, 22 days, 23 days, but it's typically no longer than 35 days, with 28 being the about average. So every 28 days you would have a period, if obviously you didn't conceive a child, but it's basically a way of knowing that a woman is fertile and she is able to reproduce and have children. So what can kind of happen with type 1 diabetes and periods? Now, again, everybody's going to go through some different things, but the main thing is you're probably going to notice some sort of insulin resistance at that point. And what I mean by insulin resistance is the same doses that you use typically are not going to work. You're probably going to have to increase the amount of insulin you use, whether it's increasing insulin actually on your period or before your period. It has to do with hormones. Your body, in response to different hormones, will often trigger insulin resistance, or your liver to release more stored sugar, therefore causing you to need to take more insulin to combat blood sugars and keep them in a healthy and normal range of blood glucose levels as possible. So typically during this time you might be increasing your basal rates, and you might be increasing how much insulin you're taking for meals, or how long you're going to take and your insulin and weight to eat a meal or a snack. Particularly, I notice, weirdly enough, before my period, about 10 days before my period, my blood sugars will kind of run either like a roller coaster where they're high, low, high, low, high, low, or they'll run consistently low, or like I can't eat enough food to keep my blood sugar up. Now, it's kind of weird. Normally, some people would run high before their period because of hormonal things, but for whatever reason, my body tends to run the opposite. But then a couple days to and the day of my period, my fasting blood sugar will go up in the 130s to 150s, and I know my period's probably going to be coming that day. And during my period, I run slightly elevated to normal, meaning that slightly elevated, my definition is 140 to 180, or I'll run normal, which means 70 to 140 for me. As far as that normal range is concerned, and it all depends on the month. It depends on how my body was functioning, and you just kind of learn to deal with it as it comes. But typically, I notice what I do for my periods is limit the amount of caffeine I'm taking. I limit the amount of carbs I'm eating only because I'm more insulin resistant during my period, so I don't eat a lot of carbs, because if you add more carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, to that insulin resistance, you're going to add more fuel to the fire and possibly have more dangerous high blood sugars than you actually want. And sometimes having those higher blood sugars is your body's way of releasing all that excess fluid. And if your body's going through that, it might kind of feel like a stressor. And maybe that might be part of the reason why your blood sugars go a little higher. Again, it could have to do with hormones, how your body responds to things. But I typically will dose myself heavier, eat lower carb, plenty of exercise. Exercise is a great way to increase your insulin sensitivity, and it is an awesome way to combat insulin resistance. So do a lot of exercise on your periods. It'll also help with cramping and any other period symptomatology you might get, like headaches, stomach upset, bloating, any type of swelling or pain that you may have be associated with your periods. Very, very helpful that way. I typically will also increase my basal rate, meaning that before I go to sleep at night, because I'm on shots, giving myself a bigger dose of basal insulin or splitting my basal dose. You're going to have to find what works for you, but if you're on a pump, do a temporary basal increase for so many days until your period is passed. And be careful taking over-the-counter pain medications. You might not be able to take them with other medications you take or other conditions you have. But I do recommend, obviously, like ibuprofen or Tylenol would work great for cramps. I use those. If you are on a continuous glucose monitor like the Dexcom, if you have the G6 like me, you can take up to 1,000 milligrams of Tylenol, I believe, per every 6 hours and not have it screw up your CGM readings and make them higher than they actually are. If you do have the G5 or lower, Tylenol does affect that, so please be cautious that you might have false high blood sugars. So don't be treating false highs and end up going low or putting a dangerous risk to yourself. But definitely invest in a glucose monitor if you can, because it's very helpful to see what happens before your period, during your period, and after your period. Typically for me, after my period's done, my body just goes back to normal and I'm good to go until I PMS and actually have my period. I define PMS for me as 10 days prior to my period, so about a week and a half, and my actual period itself lasts about 5 to 6 days. Type 1 diabetic ladies, you also do know that you can be more prone to having heavier periods. Sometimes period cramping could be worsened or not. I haven't noticed too much of this. My periods feel pretty normal. My period long before I had diabetes, and I kind of learned how to deal with it without the diabetes. Now throwing diabetes into it, you're going to have to learn to deal with some things. But do also know if you're diagnosed or just newly diagnosed and you don't have your period and it doesn't come for a couple months, don't worry about it. I've never had this problem. My period comes like clockwork. But I did talk to my endocrinologist about that, and she was kind of saying, don't be surprised if you miss your period right after you just got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and the DKA, because that can put a huge shock on your body, and your body's the last thing it's thinking about is reproducing, and it might shut off your period, or you might not ovulate and you might not get a period, and that's totally normal. And if it doesn't come back within a few months, go see a gynecologist or an OBGYN, and they'll be able to assist you with maybe getting that re-regulated or getting you on something to kind of get it started back, or helping you stress or hormone imbalance or whatever the case may be. So ladies, that is totally normal. I want to let you know that is a normal thing that can happen. I personally never had it happen. My period came like clockwork. It's almost like the DKA was not upsetting my ability to want to biologically reproduce. It wasn't upsetting that, but that is a normal thing. I wanted to let you ladies know that. I have read also other things that ladies with type 1 diabetes, we can be more susceptible to having earlier menopause, having more painful periods, longer periods, and obviously blood sugar effects. And it's actually kind of a neat way to see when your period might be coming. You have that kind of neat tool that a non-diabetic wouldn't have, is looking at blood sugars, because they do change for the most part. Not saying not all people do, but you're going to find that you're probably going to run higher or lower during a certain time, or some months you're going to find out that it's normal, and you're going to find other months where no matter what you do, you're going to be riding a roller coaster, where you run low, you eat some food, you go sky high, and you do everything proper, and then you drop low because you took, the insulin wasn't working, or you were too sensitive, or whatever the case may be. So I also do find that pre-bolusing really does help on your period. I have to pre-bolus 30 minutes before I eat on my period in order to keep blood sugars between 70 and 140. And if you're determined like me to keep normal glycemia, you need to make adjustments and make adjustments as needed. And do understand that not every month is going to be identical. As of recent year, most months I've run low to roller coastery before my period, and then I run slightly elevated during my period. But a couple times I've had it the exact opposite. Right before my period, I was sky high and insulin resistant, and then during my period, I couldn't eat enough. I could not eat enough to keep my blood sugar up. It was weird. It was like my body was responding to my hormones or to my bodily functions a little differently, and that's okay. Learn how to make those adjustments, and you can usually get a feel based upon knowing like when your body PMSs or has premenstrual syndrome, and when your body goes through an actual period, you'll kind of get to know what to do. You'll kind of know like, okay, this is a normal one where I run low before and high during. Or if you don't notice that, okay, I'm running high before but normal during, so I need to make sure I take more insulin beforehand and not during this time. Or you might find that after your period is when you have all your problems. You don't know. Deal with it as it goes and just kind of work on it by a day-to-day basis, and you're not going to figure out these patterns immediately. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for almost 9 months now, and I've had almost a year's worth of periods dealing with type 1 diabetes, and I've been able to see kind of how my body responds to it. So I hope these tips helped you, and I hope it kind of helped to give you a little guide as to knowing that it's okay. Periods will affect your blood sugars, and it's normal if they do, and it's normal if they don't. Know that my body is going to be way different than yours, but I hope some of these tips and advice has helped you out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. Feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. I post videos every week about diabetes, plus more about my life. Until next time for more videos, which would be tomorrow for another awesome video that I'm having out for you guys. Take care, God bless, be kind, spread positivity, and be thankful. Bye, everyone.